There was once a man who enrolled in a course and attended classes for 40 years. And one day asked himself just what the hell he was actually up to, but had no answer. And then thought, well, of course I don't. That's why I came here in the first place. It takes a super steady compass to stay on course amidst a reality that is magnetic in all directions. One man once mused that the enlightened are not better than everyone else. They're just smarter, dumber, stronger, weaker, uglier, and the same as everybody else. They just feel it more intently. One man who could never shake himself awake long enough for it to be of any consequence finally said to himself, that is, his thoughts said to him, don't sweat it. You'll be dead soon. Which, for all general human purposes, is the ultimate response to all human concerns. But, of course, not for a few here and there. Position vis-a-vis perception. The more locally focused your attention, the worse things seem. Tonight's neurological news. Life has its finger stuck in everyone's head. From the extended view of the few, the worst aspect of aging is how it mimics an increase in understanding. Of course, the majority unquestioningly lap it up. Once you realize that life itself is alive with its own plans and schedule, your view of men's relationship to the lives they lead can never again be the same. One man was born as Siamese twins, and for the first few decades accepted as fact that it took both of him to survive. But then one day came to an astonishing discovery, which you can probably guess by now. There was once a man riding in a rocket who became so sick of the trip that he could only survive it by not paying any attention to it. When the mind hears reports of gunfire, it naturally believes it's aimed at it. The whole idea of negative news must, by the few, be re-examined. Since even life can only speak to man in code, why expect more from such as this? The entire scope of what seems to be knowledge must by the few be continually reconsidered. The hearing of the more conscious is as subject to change as is knowledge itself. And without the key to the code, nothing man knows leads to sense. Some men once discovered a path to an unknown place, but to return home they had to lay a highway back. Thus, for their own reasons, they did. And it may also sound as though it would be of benefit to others who might care to duplicate their journey. A mental and verbal conclusion, not surprising, given the facts. In fact, how could it be otherwise? How could it not be of benefit for someone who had been to a new locale to mark out on their return the path they'd taken? Well, I'll answer that for you. The irrationality of such unknown places is only matched by that of the means of going there. There was once a man who believed that some gigantic, nefarious force was against him and his plans. Turned out to be this really big generator that needed to be shut off. News regarding the warfare within consciousness and the question of preference. One truly engaged in the conflict does not care whether he is shot by one particular bullet or the other, just as long as he is sufficiently killed. If nothing else, just think the money you'll save in munitions. Everyone recognizes that the body offers direct, unquestionable pleasures: sex, eating, moving, and resting. But why do they not see it equally as plain as regards the mental ones? That is, why do men insist on believing that there is more to thought than there demonstratively is? To those who know, the answer is simple. It's because thought must be given greater significance than it deserves just to maintain its present position. The less immediately necessary is an activity to survival, the more it must report on its own plans for tomorrow to justify its presence today. Thus it be that on one level, the more men talk, the more confused they become, but the more they talk, the more civil they become, which is the overriding collective concern. And thus it be that man, unique among life on this planet, can, in contravention to the physical laws governing all other creatures, extend his life by the mere act of speech. Men who think that what they think about amounts to any more than what they're thinking about have no idea what thinking is all about, which of course is part of its power. Once upon a time there was an imaginary kingdom which could bluff so good that it ended up preeminent. Those devoid of understanding are those who dismiss the illusionary as being irrelevant. Kings will allow the priesthood to continue so long as those running it appear themselves to take what they preach seriously. Those of you keeping track, those last, or the first 16 were all connected. Ha ha, that's right. Says one man. Says one man, on those days when I suddenly find myself less mentally frantic and the possibility of control over consciousness is closer to a reality, I am increasingly unsure whether it came about because of what I ate the night before or because of the past efforts I've made along these lines. But no matter, one thing's for certain, were it not for the latter, nothing of interest would ever happen. On one planet, you can live in the dark or you can live in the light. But no matter what you do, you'll still live in the same neighborhood as everyone else. See, that's why mystics make such good neighbors. They're not there. And a viewer wants to know if this is really about mystics and other men or about the relationship in one's mind between certain kinds of thought. Those attracted by another's charisma are in need of no more than a place to submit. In the forest of greater awareness, leadership is seen in two forms: in the lion who is strongest, meanest, and most self-centered, and in one who, through a quirk in the distribution of intelligence, understands the common cat's need for the former. For the more promising, the only danger in following someone else is that it never leads anywhere. And if you are one of the more promising, you can figure this one out. The more civilized you are, the more collectively and mechanically conscious you are. But this still doesn't mean that you're actually conscious. Tonight's cosmological news. Cosmology news. There was once a planet on which, let's do it different this time. There was once an area of human activity, mathematics, let's say, which came into being already containing all that it would ever need or contain. And all that was open to it was a continual rearranging of its elements. If you were primed for the version I started out to do regarding life on some planet, you can take what I just said about math and go ahead and finish out the story with that. Still works. More about the arrangement. The body knows what's going on but can't say, and the mind can say but don't know. Some have labeled this song, "Ah, sweet, bittersweet, rat-ass mystery of life," though I'm at a loss as to why they include the term bittersweet, other than the over-the-top melodrama to which men are naturally given when attempting to confront the impersonality of existence. You guys should be happy I didn't actually throw in the tune to that song, of which we were doing a parody vis-a-vis its title. Perhaps this footnote might be handy. When men don't care for particular aspects of the arrangement, the most common description that springs from their lips is the word injustice. And further note, does not the fact that there is never an adequate reply to this charge offer an additional hint that man's sense of justice and the equitable arrangement of things may itself be radically flawed? Which it would, did not the mind take it also personally. Which it's meant to do, but in the early, original days of mystical activity on this planet, it was divided into two major schools. The first was identified as being for those who think too much, and the second for those who think too little. But then, as always happens among the more alert, a splinter group, not aligned with either of the major two, appeared, and, well, I'm not sure I should go into that just quite yet. You think about it, or not, as you're so inclined. One man, most sane and ordinary, one day thought, it's by God great to be totally under the control of a greater force, and especially so not being aware of it. You can only be disturbed by death by having no personal acquaintance with genes. Adult version, same idea. You can only be bothered by stupidity by being stupid yourself. Tonight's mythology news. The most ancient records yet found concerning man's ideas of a deity reveal him originally picturing God as the only being who can point at himself. Thought is a ladder by which man has raised himself above all other creatures, but one whose rungs cut the feet of a few. And let's leash this guy of hand. Let's stop for a moment and give a big mournful sigh for the few. Aww. Okay. The seesaw of the mind. As long as you accept that everyone else is individually conscious, you'll believe that you are. And as long as you keep believing that you are, you'll keep right on giving everyone else credit for being so, and thus keep right on holding them responsible for the same kinds of foolishness for which you now forgive yourself. And if you're immediately right to say that this one almost made sense. And if that be so, then God help us, dear viewers. When an ordinary man speaks, he speaks in part for all ordinary men. The reason it appears that there is no solution to men intellectually drowning is because they are not. Thoughts are like the only species of fish with arms long enough to reach back around and strangle themselves. But don't tell them I told you that. Hobbies in the city. The simple gossip about behavior. The bit more sophisticated do battle over ideas. And anything left over, I guess the mystically inclined pick up on. Based upon our commitment to truth and newscasting, I should point out the misdirection in the heading of this item. Everything in the city is a hobby. Me distinguishing specific ones is just another one. Tonight's death news. A bad heart can sure take you out in a flash, but thoughts can do even worse. That is to say, take longer. People believe that those more conscious must have more to worry about. Just look at the lives they concoct for their religious heroes. How civilization works. If everybody pretends that something is serious and meaningful, it is. Tune in next time when we'll tackle the subject of thought. A man once asked a mystic if learning the truth about life was not, at one level, tantamount to committing suicide. And the mystic replied that such could be said, but further noted that it is only by such an act that one can experience a rebirth. And the man asked the mystic if the latter was guaranteed. And the mystic asked the man if he was positive he wanted an answer to this question. Thoughts, offering their assistance in the struggle for consciousness, is not at all unlike bars in a prison cell, aiding an escape by assuring the one inside that he is in fact free. The original name of this tune, when it first appeared on earth, was, "If it works for you, it works for you. What more do you want?" But men quickly abandoned this title, it being too direct and conclusive, and continue to this day to concoct new seeming names for this song, which describe things in a more, shall we say, collectively acceptable manner. Minimal consciousness, by gentility art thou synonymously known. Would it help to read it yourself? Perhaps not. One of the things to be said in favor of remaining ordinary is that even though you drowned, you do so in the company of everyone else, and not out somewhere in the woods alone. According to where your attention is, that was either our sociological commentary for the day or else our joke to make you choke. At the end, one man entitled his autobiography, "Everyone is, regardless of what you think." He says he can hardly wait for the back to come out. Tonight's travel news. If it's obvious that you can get there from here, you still don't see where there actually is. Well, for one thing, obvious has nothing to do with it, for one thing. If anyone would care for a more embracing definition of civilization, hug on this one. Civilization, a place where prattle passes for insight. And not to forget that the actual location of civilization is in man's head. Regarding intelligence and momentum, the simple can never be slowed down. Regardless of how special all would-be mystics feel themselves to be, the truth is that everything that everyone does beyond keeping themselves physically alive is their attempt to become more conscious. Don't feel so special now, do you? That is, until you're back to the realization that it does them no individual good, and that even with the specific efforts you make, it still remains problematic. In his striving to understand how to handle the bad news of the world, one man finally came to the solution of abandoning all news. That is, after he first came to realize that all news, no matter its apparent nature, is no more than one's own thinking, which to a few is always bad, no matter its message. If a man does not truly exist as a man unless he is conscious, then once you realize man's normal state of consciousness, you can no longer say that he exists as a man. Tonight's time saver tip. If you want to remain as ignorant as everyone else, just continue thinking about the same things they think about. A father noted to his son, when it comes to the matter of friendship, we should take a lesson from life. For no matter what happens, life never lets itself down. And finally, a king once offered a mystic a fairly impressive-looking ring in return for him answering the question of whether the secret, always spoken of by the mystics, was simply knowing the truth about being alive. And after several seconds of no response, the mystic finally said, "Let me have a better look at that ring." Although everyone will say that they want to know the truth about what's going on, the truth is, if they had any real idea of what is, they'd pay not to know. But hey, free jewelry is free jewelry. Keeping in mind all of the previous and yet to come warnings that we do not actually talk about what we appear to talk about here. That at the very least is always metaphorical, having no interest in the literal subjects used as examples. I wanted to point out again not to comment on life or of any of the affairs that are included in the example about to be, if I may say so deftly plucked from the branches of mundane existence. Read current affairs. This has to do specifically with how, not only how far removed talk is from what happens, but how far removed man's realization of how far talk is removed. And very recent days, and one of the better known Western European countries, a fine example of the leading ranks of ordinary civilization, the progress of man. They were celebrating their Independence Day, recognition of the time at which they broke loose from autocratic control, went from being a fiefdom, a serfdom, into a so-called free and democratic society. And in the midst of the celebration, as I'm sure most everyone knows, a so-called terrorist bomb was set off in their capital city, killing a sizable number of people, injuring even more. And within hours, the Prime Minister came on television, was covered all over the world, but he came on television specifically for his people and said something along these lines. That the celebrations would continue unabated, for they would not let this uncivil, terroristic act prove to be encouragement to other potential deranged minds who might then, if they saw the effect, if they saw the explosion having what the Prime Minister described as the desired effect, then it would simply encourage other potential maniacs to actually execute their dastardly plans. All right. There is several things. First off, and it's not an insult now, but there is a prime example of a news item tonight of a more comprehensive definition of what civilization is, prattle, place where prattle passes for insight. Because anyone with any intelligence, by the ordinary definition, not my definition, can take that idea, the reality of the idea, and the idea itself, and all it takes is just a cursory examination of it, consideration of it, and you know it's foolishness. All I've got to do is point it out. Remember the basic sentiment that the Prime Minister was expressing, that we cannot, as good, decent, Italians or French or whoever it was. We cannot, we will not allow such a cowardly act by one deranged mind to put a halt to bring civilization itself, in this case being represented by their celebration of past political freedom, the gaining thereof. We will not let them shut down our open and free society, one man. Least, it simply encourage and prove to other potentially, likewise madmen, that they can succeed, get their desire by engaging in such uncivilized acts. Anyone who knows anything knows that if someone puts a bomb in downtown Rome or any large city, blows up, kills people, as horrible as the act is, anyone knows, all you've got to do is point it out, anyone knows that it is not true, that there are madmen, other potential